Darrell Porter was a hard-nosed catcher known for his time behind the plate in the 70s and 80s golden years of the Kansas City Royals and the St. Louis Cardinals, respectively. He was a four-time All-Star on the field, but off the field he struggled with substance abuse for decades, before seemingly kicking his habit late in his baseball career and becoming a beloved advocate for sobriety. He was possibly the first star athlete to fully open up about his relationship with drugs, which was kind of revolutionary in an era notorious for its substance issues. Today we look at the roller coaster that was the life of Darrell Porter. Before we get rolling, please like and subscribe. Help the algorithm help me find a good audience. Also, bear with me in this first part. There's basically no Milwaukee Brewers footage from this era available online for whatever reason, so the footage included might feel a little random because, well, it is. Darrell Porter was born in Joplin, Missouri in 1952. He was a standout athlete at Southeast High School in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. 40 college programs, including the University of Oklahoma, were actively recruiting Darrell as a quarterback when he was drafted 4th overall by the Milwaukee Brewers in the 1970 MLB draft. He was assigned to the Class A Clinton Pilots, where he struggled mightily, mustering only a 200 average in 185 at-bats that season. In the dog days of this season, Porter turned to alcohol and began frequenting bars, noting that it helped calm his nerves. This would mark the beginning of Porter's complex dependency and subsequent abuse of alcohol. Porter's bat improved during his sophomore season in Class A ball. He batted .271 with 24 home runs and 70 RBIs. His defensive play from the catcher position was in a league of its own, and it propelled him to skip 2 levels of minor league play for a late-season call-up to the Brewers on September 2, 1971. That offseason, he began experimenting with K-Ludes, a barbiturate used to suppress the central nervous system. They were a popular street drug at that time, particularly within the disco scene. They're sometimes referred to as disco biscuits. He cited K-Ludes as his drug of choice. Porter would simplify his approach at the plate for the 73 season and add over 100 percentage points to his batting average. He tied for 3rd in American League Rookie of the Year voting, an award that was won by Orioles outfielder Al Bumbry. Porter made his first appearance at the Midsummer Classic in 1974. Following this honor, he would slump at the plate again for a large portion of the season. On September 23rd, in the second game of a doubleheader in Cleveland, Porter made headlines across the country when he jumped on top of the away dugout and attacked a fan who had heckled him all night. Porter declined to comment on the incident. He was suspended for 3 games. Porter had a solid season in 1975, but his 1976 season would prove to be a hot mess on and off the field. His batting woes flared up once again, and Porter started using cocaine at a party to try and fit in. Coke was added to his existing cocktail of alcohol and K-Ludes to, quote, dull the agony of living. Speaking of the agony of living, what I find interesting about this part of Porter's story is how it appears to perfectly intersect with Danny Thomas's story. Danny Thomas was an infamous Milwaukee outfielder who was called up the fall of 1976, and upon returning to the team for spring training in '77, he notified the team that he refused to play on the Sabbath because he was a member of the Worldwide Church of God, founded by radio and televangelist Herbert Armstrong, who had incorrectly predicted the end of the world the year prior. This charismatic evangelical sect had a strict observance of the Sabbath from sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday. Thomas would be referred to as the Sundown Kid. Thomas was a great player, but even the most forgiving major league owner, which Bud Selig genuinely seemed to be in this case, couldn't handle a player missing a third of their games. Thomas was sent back down to AAA, where his declining mental health and abuse of drugs would eventually take him out of baseball, forcing several unsuccessful stays in rehab. In 1980, while in prison for a rape charge, Thomas committed suicide by hanging. Thomas was a severely troubled human being, possibly the most troubled the game of baseball has ever seen, but it's highly likely his mental well-being was damaged far before he clung to both religion and substances to try and get through his troubles. Over the years, Darrell Porter would take on a very similar routine, hitting rock bottom with drugs, landing in rehab, becoming a born-again Christian, rinse and repeat. Darrell Porter was dealt to the Kansas City Royals in 1977, where he got a fresh new start with an exciting team on the heels of winning a division title. They would put together the only 100-win season in franchise history in '77 and repeat as division champs twice more, each time being defeated by the Yankees in the ALCS. Darrell Porter was an All-Star 3 consecutive years from 1978 to 1980. In 1980, the Royals would finally make it to the World Series, falling to the Phillies in 6 games. Porter's bat was quiet throughout this postseason run. He batted just .143 in the World Series. This winter, Porter said he hit rock bottom mentally, spending each night sitting in the dark, clutching a shotgun, and staring out the window waiting for Commissioner Bowie Kuhn to arrive and dismiss him from baseball for good. Thankfully, the commish never chose to come knocking. Darrell Porter signed with the Cardinals that offseason, another significant transaction being that they traded away fan favorite All-Star catcher Ted Simmons. The St. Louis fans adamantly disliked Porter because of this when he first came to town. The players' strike would shorten this season, which, as you could predict, led to plenty of downtime for Porter to abuse substances once again. In 1982, the Cardinals would go the distance and meet the Brewers in the World Series. The Brewers would embarrass the Cardinals 10-0 at Busch Stadium in Game 1. I believe Gorman Thomas was still just pissed off over all those eephus pitches. The Cardinals would eventually prevail in 7 games, and Porter would be named World Series MVP. Porter authored his only book, Snap Me Perfect, in 1984, which gave a first-hand account of his struggles and how they paralleled his ups and downs within baseball. Porter's Cardinals made it back to the World Series in 1985, which was yet another rematch with a former team for him. The Cardinals lost to the Royals in a series that featured one of the most controversial calls of all time in Game 6, which notably the Cardinals would go back to the locker room with champagne everywhere and their lockers saran-wrapped in anticipation for a celebration that never happened. Darrell Porter would finish his career on a 2-year deal with the Rangers before he was out of baseball. Celebrating a few years sober at this point, Porter traveled the country as a motivational speaker, sharing his story and his recovery process. He also spoke on behalf of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and the Enjoy the Game Foundation, a group who promoted sportsmanship and a positive environment for young athletes away from toxic parents known to ruin the experience. Boy, we could use that today. On August 5, 2002, a 50-year-old Darrell Porter was found lying next to his car in a park in Sugar Creek, Missouri, deceased. Police theorized he'd wrecked his car into a tree stump, and he simply died of heat exhaustion trying to push the car off the stump on the 97-degree day. A few days later, the medical examiner's report verified that Porter had indeed relapsed back into cocaine use and was in a state of drug-induced delirium when he passed away. Time and time again, Porter tried to escape his vices and took on a noble pursuit to dissuade others from them as well. He recognized that he had a disease. It was a disease that followed him throughout his whole life, and it preyed upon him after well over a decade of sobriety. Let's remember Darrell Porter for all the amazing postseason memories he provided to the Midwest sports fans and the mission he put together to clean up the game. Take it easy.
The following message is furnished by Major League Baseball in cooperation with the Players Association.
As a ball player, I make plenty of decisions every game, but the best decision I ever made affected my entire life. I decided to give up drugs, and for me, it was a life-saving choice. As a young person, you make decisions every day. Don't let drugs ruin your future. Make the right choice. Say no to drugs. Baseball cares about you and your family.